We have had a whole bunch of wonderful versions of the idea of hope. Here is another one. It comes as a Taoist story from China with a profound lesson for us all. Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who had a horse and a little land and a family to feed. He was poor, but he had enough. He had his oldest son to help out with the work, and he had that horse. So he managed fairly, as long as most things went pretty well. But one day, someone left the barn door open, and the horse who was their only means of running the pump and plowing the field and riding to town, the horse ran away. When news of this event got out, the neighbors came over to commiserate. "Oh, how awful that your horse ran away," they said. "How will you manage? What will you do? Your life is ruined." But the farmer was a philosophical sort. He answered his neighbors, "Well, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, who knows?" Well, lo and behold, the next day, the horse came back from the forest with several wild female horses in tow. This made for quite a bounty. And when news of this miracle came about, the neighbors all came around again to see the new horses and to congratulate the farmer. "You have it made in the shade," they said happily. "You are a rich man." And the farmer, though, he was a philosophical sort, and you know what he said? He said, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." Well, the next day, the farmer's oldest son went out to the corral to try and break in the new horses, train them to bit and bridle, make them more useful, and one of the horses kicked the boy and broke his leg. Neighbors all came around to help with casseroles and commiseration. "Oh, this is terrible," they said. "Broken legs never really knit correctly. He could be crippled for life." And all the farmer could say, "Well, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." And the neighbors went away, shaking their heads. Well, a week later, a war broke out, and the emperor's soldiers came looking for conscripts. And of course, they passed up the farmer's son with the broken leg, but all the other young men in the village were forced to go with them, maybe never to return. After the soldiers had left town, the neighbors crept up to the farmer's house to congratulate him on his good luck. But the farmer said, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we'll see." Well, the story could go on forever, of course, but I think you get the idea. And of course, this doesn't mean that gift horses are not to be celebrated and that broken legs should be taken with the utmost seriousness. When we say maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, we're not really talking about the obvious and the immediate, but rather we mean that the future is vast, that we can't know what good will come from the bad or what bad will come from the good. We also don't always know for sure if the judgments we've made about good and bad are accurate in any way. Everything changes. That's as true of modern American elections as it is of once upon a time Chinese farmers. Taoism, you may remember, is the home of the yin-yang sign. This figure, which is called the Tai Chi, like the exercise Tai Chi, consists of two nested fish figures in opposite colors, forever swimming around each other within the circle, and always with a dot of the opposite color within each. This is a profound symbol of hope. It reminds us that things are always changing, that there are no absolutes, that we must always remember that there is light in the darkness and always darkness in the light, that all opposites entail each other. What is a good person but a bad person's teacher, reads one verse of the Tao Te Ching. And what's a bad person but a good person's job? I found this a hard week to be thinking and writing about hope, frankly. Although I had kept up my hope through the election cycle so far and celebrated many of the results, the things I felt I had lost seemed heavy and worrisome, and the uncertainty of the week had threatening overtones. Hope, this tiny feathered bird that Emily Dickinson says perches in the soul, flew away a few times last week for me. Maybe for you too. I am by disposition an optimist. That is, it's part of my psychological makeup to see the good side of things and the big picture and the long haul. I feel lucky that way. Studies show that optimists are happier, although pessimists are more often right. Optimism and pessimism seem to be mostly inborn traits. They know that by studying twins who were raised apart. But they are also partially based on a person's life experiences and their mood. Neither is better. Extreme optimism can be cockeyed, leading to some dysfunctional inability to deal with the world as it is. We've seen some of that lately. While pessimists are apparently more accurate in imagining the future, extreme pessimism is a misery to the pessimists and all those around them, and that can lead to dysfunctional decisions as well, and a constrained, risk-averse life. Are you an optimist or a pessimist by nature? It's important to know ourselves so we can take our natural inclinations in hand when necessary and modify our behavior when we need to. So although they are not universally agreed on definitions here, optimism and pessimism are usually used to denote overall assessments of the world and one's future prospects, while hope tends to be our attitude towards things that are more concrete and immediate. I am optimistic about the long arc of history bending towards justice. We can talk about that, but I doubt that you'll sway me. I seem to have that faith burned into my soul. I hope that we'll have a wet winter in our drought-ridden state. And I hope that this election will be settled in a way that most people can believe is accurate and just. I no longer hope that we will have a united nation anytime soon. I'm sad about that, but I think I'm realistic. You'll have your own assessments about all those things. We could talk about it, and I might even change my mind if you had enough facts and statistics and examples on your side. So let's talk about hope. There are two kinds of hope: hope the emotion, and hope the spiritual discipline. The hope you have after winning a crucial election, for instance, as conservatives felt 4 years ago and as liberals felt last Saturday, that was hope the emotion. It was a great feeling that we get when things are going our way, when victory is in the air, when life is looking better all the time. That kind of hope comes with falling balloons and rising butterflies and the cheers of the crowd. What fun it is to say, "See, we were right," and "See, the nation is filled with people who agree with us. See, the future is bright." That kind of hope is a very good thing. It's not necessarily gloating, although it feels like that to the losers and therefore is best celebrated with one's compatriots. But it's still an important celebration. Life is so often hard. Decisions in this red and blue nation go so often against what we want and think is fair that we should revel in that kind of hope and remember it. If you're filled with that emotion, hope, go for it. Cherish it. There's a second kind of hope, not the kind that celebrates clear skies ahead, but the kind that's determined to keep on moving forward. In the book Moby Dick, the main characters are out on a small boat away from their main ship, and a storm suddenly blows up and blows them apart from each other. even from visual contact with their mates and their only lifeline. To try to shout, writes Melville, would be as futile as shouting into the chimney of a roaring furnace. The winds and waves are so high that bailing the boat is pointless. The oars, he writes, are useless as propellers, performing now the office of life preservers. Furthermore, it is getting dark. They have a lantern, and after many attempts, it is lighted and handed to a man to hold aloft on a stick, to give their shipmates a way to find them. Watching him, the narrator comments that he was holding up that imbecile candle in the heart of that almighty forlornness. There, then, he sat, the sign and symbol of a man without faith, hopelessly holding up hope in the midst of despair. Whoa, maybe things aren't quite as bad as we thought they were. That kind of hope asks a great deal of us. It asks us to put aside what we are feeling, which is despair, to do the work of hope anyway, because, well, there's no other option. Because if we're going down, we want to at least go down fighting. Because unlikely as the thing we hope for might be, if it's going to happen, we want to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. That kind of hope is not a good feeling. It is a job description. And that kind of hope is based on faith. We UUs are heretics about other people's faith, but we have plenty of faith of our own, and therefore we can do the work of hope. Since it's easy to lose sight of both faith and hope, we need to be reminded about how this works. Here are some of the things many UUs have faith in. We have faith in the basic goodness of life now. We have hope that the future will also contain its share of goodness. We have faith in the power of love. We look to a future in which love in some form will be a part of our lives. We have faith in democracy. For all its flaws, we have faith that it is the most just kind of government and the one most likely to yield the greatest good for the greatest number. And we hope, therefore, that it continues to do that into the future. We have faith in a divine power of healing and renewal that works for good in our lives, many of us, and we know that somehow that will be manifest in our future as well as in our present. We have faith in the arc of the universe that bends towards justice, in that magnificent phrase of Martin Luther King Jr., lifted from 19th century Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing. Therefore, we work with that arc. I think that most of us would say we do have faith in at least some of those things: the goodness of life, the efficacy of democracy in producing justice, the universe bending towards justice. None of these concepts are proven or provable, and any one of them could be called into doubt with the help of any day's newspaper. These are articles of faith and watchwords of our lives, not facts and figures, sometimes not even noticeable trends. But still we believe, and therefore we hope. When we extend our belief into the future, that's our hope. This kind of hope is not a feel-good emotion. It's a work, a practice, a discipline. The kind of discipline that, even when there is no rescue in sight, fumbles with the matches and lights the lantern. In Christian wisdom, hope is called a virtue. That is to say, not a lucky trait of personality that some people have and some don't, but a thing that's practiced, a thing that's prayed for, a thing you just do. Here's some of the practices of hope, the virtue, for use after you lose elections, or when it's time to start a new election, or when you face terrible news, or when grief starts. They're even useful while enduring depression. First of all, be rigorously rational, or as the Black activist Amy quoted earlier calls it, take an unvarnished view of reality. Our too hopeful minds can lead us down some garden paths if we are not honest with ourselves. Our hopeless minds tell us that we are doomed or alone or unloved, when that is never completely true. This is the wisdom of the Chinese farmer. He knew that the horse, while important, wasn't the only good thing in his life, just as he knew that wealth, as useful as it can be, is not the only good thing in his life. And that gave him the emotional stamina to live through life's ups and downs. The unvarnished view of reality is not shiny, but it goes deep. The second discipline of hope, therefore, is to not believe everything that comes into our heads, not to mention everything we read on social media. We have to think for ourselves. We have to know the ways we're likely to kid ourselves and lean away from those. We have to remember not to follow the mob on the street or the mob on Facebook. We need to remember to research things that are too good to be true, and those things that are so outrageous that we ought to suspect that the writer has an agenda. We don't want to waste our hope on rumors. And if we need to succumb to despair, at least let's make it a real one. The third discipline of hope in these oh-so-connected days is to remember always that we are pretty much at the mercy of a media which stays alive by attracting our attention and feeding our fear. And that's all of them, even your beloved NPR, although they do keep the volume moderated. So turn it off. If you get your news only once a day or once a week even, you will remain an informed, responsible person. Always consider your sources. Choose and support your news media carefully. Fourth, get on with your life. 4 years ago, Garrison Keillor wrote in the Washington Post a mostly doom and gloom piece for liberals like us, as he said. And by that, he said, I mean libertarians, children's authors, yoga practitioners, Unitarians, bird watchers, people who make their own pasta, opera goers, grammar police, people who keep their books on their shelves, that bunch. Whew, he's got our number. He says, we liberals are so exhausted from thinking about this election, millions of people are going to take up leaf raking and garage cleaning with intense pleasure. Good idea, if you haven't done it already. Remember that it's true that we are better together, even if this miserable COVID has made that together virtual. Reach out to friends, log into church, proclaim a family night, make popcorn and cuddle. Pat the dog who is going bonkers, wondering what in the world is wrong with you. Strengthen your connections, watch your temper, smile at your neighbors and even the people on the street, and make it big enough that they can see it through the mask. Finally, remember your faith and your values and light a candle to see you and your boatmates through this hard time. Set your feet to quietly be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. Doing your bit for the arc of justice, even when it seems to be on an S curve. Love your neighbors, even when they disagree with you. Act on your faith, because that's where your hope comes from. Last summer, when I heard that our elections clerk needed hundreds of new election workers to replace her mostly elderly stalwarts, who very rightly felt that working the polls would be dangerous for their health this year, I thought I should probably volunteer. I believe in free and fair elections and in voter access and making the process work. Time to act on my beliefs. I signed up, got trained, and by the way, if you ever meet someone who doubts election integrity, suggest that they be trained to be a poll worker. The safeguards and systems they have in place are very impressive. I picked up my safety equipment and steeled myself for a long day of we didn't really know what that day would be like. But my experience was, it seems, not so different from almost every place. People were glad to be voting. Lots of new voters nervously learned the ropes. Everybody wanted their I voted sticker. 1 in 1,000 people refused to wear a mask. Lines were modest, problems were solved. The voting population was very diverse and very mixed where I was. No problem. Civility, accuracy, justice reigned. It was hard to believe that my polling place was in the same nation as the one I'd seen on the news. It was an experience that fueled my hope for the greatness of America. And that little lifeboat, in the midst of our raging storm, everybody was pulling together for democracy. Even if the day had been ugly, though, the fact that I was doing what needed to be done for my country would have brought me a glimmer of hope. With apologies to Emily Dickinson, that little bird of hope does ask for something of us. She asks to be fed. So let's feed her with our closing hymn, Keep on Moving Forward.